Hello everyone, this is SoCalQuest with BlueFirePoker.com. So far I've been making videos of me playing mostly and talking about general strategies on how to beat the various limits, or talking about hands that come up that are pretty interesting. Today I will be using a hand replayer to talk about hand reading. I know many of you have probably seen, the live poker players playing tournaments on TV, such as Daniel Negreanu, and they're just, dead on with reading their opponent's hand. I probably won't be able to do that or help you guys do that. I mean, it'll take some time to do that, but I will be able to help you put your opponents on a range of hands based on the actions they've taken and their previous tendencies. By doing that, we'll be able to gauge what our action should be based on our own hand against their range of hands. This is the first hand I'd like to talk about. I've only played a few hands at the table, and I've won $22 so far, but I don't recognize any of these names. I don't think they're regulars, so not only do I not have reads on them, they don't have reads on me, I suspect. I'll talk about the hand and the actions of the players as we go. So, first position player want to win million. He raises to 350. Like I said, I don't have any reads on this player, but I can make a few assumptions. Since he has bought in for less than the maximum, which should be $100, and more than the minimum 20, or maybe he bought in for 100 and he hasn't auto topped off. That's typically the sign of a pretty weak player. I mean, it's not necessarily true all the time, but from my experiences, that's what I found. Well, he opens in first position, and for most players opening in this position, their hand range is going to be a little bit tighter. Usually any pair, a lot of Broadway cards. Depending on if they are positionally aware, they should be opening a smaller number of hands from this position than, let's say, the button. Okay, so KBZ folds, EROM folds, and this is just pretty much a standard call. Like I said, his hand range should be pretty tight. 8-8 won't play as well in a 3-bet pot when his hand range is already tight, so I think it's just, an easy call. And Palaki folds. So we see a flop of King Deuce tray with a flush draw on board. This is a decent flop for my hand. He has kings in his range. He has ace king, king queen, king jack, maybe king 10 suited would open from that position. So he definitely could have hit the king. He could have missed it as well. He could have any set too as well. So my hand plays decently against a lot of the hands he's c-betting here. So if he has ace queen, ace jack, or queen jack, or if he's c-betting pocket fours, fives, sixes, sevens, I'm doing okay against a lot of the range that missed. So I decided to check and intend on calling a c-bet from this player. He goes ahead and checks behind. So what does that tell me? Well, I don't think he'd be checking a king on this board. It just wouldn't make sense. Normally players c-bet, any king in the range, and I don't suspect he has a flush draw. I also think he would be continuation betting that hand as well. Hands that some players do check back with a king in them are weak kings, like king 5, king 6, king 7, kind of turning him into bluff catchers, but I don't think he'd be opening those hands from that position, although, like I said, I don't have any specific reads, so I'm not entirely sure if he wouldn't. So while he may occasionally have a king or flush draw, I can, for the most part, discount a lot of the hands with kings or flush draws from his range. What he might be doing this with, it depends on the quality of player he is. So some players on this type of board will go ahead and just start giving up with their air. So if they raised 9-10 suited and they missed on this board, they're just going to check it back and then check down and lose, usually. A good player will check back hands that have some showdown value on this board. So if he has ace queen, some players do check that hand down. If he has queens, jacks, tens, nines, they don't always bet those hands as well. Occasionally the king comes, they might want to pot control a little bit. So he does have some hands that beat me, and some hands that have 6 outs against me. When the 3 comes, I elect to bet because I want to protect my hand. I think most likely my hand is good in this spot. He could have hands, like I said, nines through queens, although I think he bets those a decent percentage as well. But, I mean, he could have ace queen, jack 10, jack 9 suited if he has that ace 10. So a ton of hands that have six outs against me. So I do bet in order to protect my hand a little bit. And he calls. So I'm inclined to believe at this point that he has a hand like queens, jacks, tens, nines. It makes the most sense in his range. I do see him playing a king this way if he ever gets to the turn in that manner, but like I said, I discount most of the kings in his range. And he calls. So I'm pretty sure my hand is beat majority of the time, unless I don't think he ever has a 3. The only 3s he could have raising from that position would be pocket 3s, and that's very unlikely. Same with 2s, only pocket 2s, and I think he would have bet those on the flop as well. So we get to the river, and it's a 10, completing a flush draw. The 10, for the most part, is a blank. I don't think he ever gets to the river with a 10 in his hand. King 10 probably bet the river. 10 jack folds the turn, or should at least. Same with 9-10 suited. I doubt he would have that hand. Other than it bringing the flush draw that completed a flush draw that he played this way, the 10 of hearts is for the most part a blank to me. I check and am pretty sure that when he checks back, I am for the most part going to be losing, except if he decided to call with ace queen or ace jack on the turn. A lot of his other check back range that called the turn would be jacks, nines, eights. So I guess he could have the 10 if he played pocket 10s this way. And he bets $13. So now I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't make all that much sense. The flush got there, and I think he bets a lot of his flush draws on the flop. The king, like I said, I'm pretty sure he's betting all his kings on the flop. So although he occasionally shows up with king here, I kind of discount that as well. So I'm trying to think about hands besides 10-10 that get there on the river and want to value bet. Is this player going to start value betting pocket jacks here, pocket nines? He could, and although I think it's unlikely, most players, especially with pocket nines, see that board, think I have showdown value, I'm just going to check it back. And I think it's a good play to do that as well. Same goes with pocket jacks and pocket queens. So there aren't many hands he's representing here that get to the river the way they did, besides pocket tens that beat me. That means he has to bet a lot of air here, which also doesn't make sense because a lot of the air he has would be folding the turn when I bet. So that leaves combinations of ace queen, ace jack that might be turning those hands with some showdown value into a bluff. In cases like this where their bet makes very little sense and they're representing basically one hand, I think I can definitely look him up with 8-8 here profitably. So I elect to call, and he has queen 9 offsuit. So pretty poorly played from this player, and based on my hand strength on that board texture, it's not very strong. I lose to any full houses, any king, any 10, pocket nines, pocket queens, pocket jacks, any flush. So I mean, I lose to a ton of hands. But given the way he played the hand, he couldn't logically represent many of them. So when he could pretty much only represent pocket tens or an oddly played flush or king, I do like the call there. Based on the way he played the hand, I think it's pretty poor. Queen 9 offsuit is definitely not going to show a profit raising from under the gun. It's definitely a hand he wants to c-bet once there's a great flop like King 2 tray. That's not going to hit me very often. I'm going to have to fold a lot of my hand range. So when he doesn't c-bet there, that's also another mistake. Calling is pretty atrocious on the turn. His hand has no value. My hand doesn't necessarily. I mean, I could have king here. I could have flush draw. I could have pocket pair. So I mean, my hand could be strong, or my range could be strong here as well. So he should automatically be folding that. Once he gets there to the river and I check, and he bets that hand, I mean, it'll work occasionally because I will stab at the turn with hands with no showdown value, but for the most part, he's not representing anything, and I was able to pick off that bluff. Okay, the second hand I'd like to talk about involves a better player than the first hand. This hand will be played against Alligator here in the small blind. I've played about 500 hands with him so far, and I think he is. Well, I know he's a winning regular. He plays about 22-15, so it's about a standard tag, and the relevant stat in this hand is that he only folds to continuation bets about 45% of the time, which is a little bit low. So he does fight for pots quite a bit. And we are playing four-handed, making Queen 8 a little bit stronger. It's not a standard open for me, but four-handed I open quite a bit of my buttons. So the player folds to me in the button, and I open 2.5x on the button. Ship it folds, Alligator calls. What does this mean about Alligator's hand range? Well, I can discount, since I raised a large part of his range, most of the junk like 7 deuce, check tray, 8-5, just a lot of hands that just are totally unplayable. It leaves a lot of Broadway cards, any pair, and a lot of suited connectors, one gap suited connectors, two gap suited connectors. So a reasonable hand range, I suspect, in this spot, since I raised pretty small in the button. And the flop comes Jack 2-2. So yeah, I don't expect this to have hit him very often. He may have a jack. If he does, I expect him to check call. I don't think he ever has a 2 here, to be honest. A lot of the hands he will be continuing with are, I suspect, ace highs, maybe some king highs, any pair for the most part he called with before the flop. So it checks to me my hand pretty weak. I decide to c-bet to get him to fold out. I don't expect him to fold out any pair. I expect him to fold out some king highs, some ace highs. If queen high is best at the moment, protect that a little bit. And he check raises me about 3.5 times my continuation bet. This doesn't make much sense to me for a strong hand. I don't think he's check raising a jack here very often. A lot of, I know he's a winning player, so I mean, he may check raise ace jack or king jack, but some of the other jacks in his range, I expect him to call. He wouldn't expect better hands to fold or worse hands to call for the most part. And he's going to be playing against me. I consider myself, I'm sure he knows I'm a winning regular too, so he's going to be playing out of position the rest of the hand, a bloated pot. If he does have like jack 10, jack 9, it'll be fairly difficult for him. And if he did have a pair, let's say he called with pocket 6s, pocket 7s, again, I doubt he would be raising this. Some players do, and it just doesn't make much sense to me. But they're typically poorer players. So I think he's pretty good. I don't think he's doing that. So a lot of his check raising range here is going to be air. So he knows this isn't hitting me very hard. I raise small before the flop. I mean, I could have a jack in my range. I doubt he expects me to fold that, but a lot of hands like the one I have, queen 8, and most of my hand range definitely just misses this board, so I'll be having to fold to his check raise a lot here, meaning it's a very profitable situation for him to check raise. Again, I said he doesn't give up on the flop very often, so it doesn't necessarily mean he has a big hand like ace jack, king jack, or 2. So I'm gonna elect to float him here by calling. I position the rest of the hand. I know he has air here a lot, so I decide to call and reevaluate on the turn. The 4 comes, and at this point, I think if he were to bet, that 4 didn't help him. Very, very unlikely that it helped him. And considering a lot of his hand range in this spot is air, I have the option if he bets to either call again and then bluff the river, or if he bets like 22, shove over the top and expect him to fold most of the time. So that's, I'm unsure of what I'm going to do. It depends on how much he bets in this spot, really. What does he think my hand is at this point? So far, I've shown aggression. I've raised before the flop and then c-bet the flop. That doesn't mean much. I don't have the bottom 30% of hands, or probably bottom 50% of hands, which I am definitely just folding before the flop. So, I mean, I have a really wide hand range here as well. When he continuation bets and I call, I mean, it's very likely at that point that I'm calling with any pair. So, pocket 3s plus, any jack, ace jack, king jack, queen jack, 10 jack, I'm opening, jack 9, maybe like a jack 8 suited. So a lot of the jacks in my range I'm definitely calling with. And I suspect that's about what he'd put me on. So he checks, which is interesting. I thought he would continue here because he did check raise the flop. And when he checks, I'm fairly certain he's giving up on the hand. And I don't want him to check raise me as a bluff here, and then I'd have to fold, because I would, if he check raises all in, I have no choice but to fold queen high. And like I said, my hand range here, perceived hand range, or one I'm trying to represent, would be any pair plus a lot of the jacks. So when he does check here, if I bet, I'm pretty much just representing the jacks, because I mean, I wouldn't logically start betting 8-8 here, 9-9, 10-10, pocket 7s, any of those hands. It just wouldn't make sense. I have showdown value. I'd probably check it back and then check the river again, or probably bet the river with a lot of those hands. But by betting, it really narrows my hand down to a float, which is what I have, and a jack. So what I'm trying to represent is the other pairs by checking. And I think it's more credible to check here, and since I think he's given up on the hand when he checks the river again, bet the river. And that is essentially my plan on this board. So the 5 comes, essentially another blank. He checks, and I bet. Okay, so I bet 22. It's not that big. It's pretty much a standard value bet. And at this point, what hands am I representing? I'm representing any jack that's in my range. That's probably jack 8 suited plus, jack 9 offsuit plus. I would definitely be betting, since if I had 10-10 here, 10s, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, pocket 7s, pocket 6s, I think I'd bet all those hands. Maybe not pocket 6s, maybe not pocket 7s, but I would definitely be betting some of the higher pairs. I don't think I could logically represent aces, kings, and queens. I'm pretty sure I would have either 3-bet the flop or bet the turn with them once he checked me. So it's doubtful I have those hands, but now I can definitely represent more than a jack. I can represent medium-sized pairs and any jack. So I expect this bet to work almost always. So he goes ahead and calls me. So I was kind of wondering what he had here. It wouldn't make sense for him to have, any pair less than a jack. I didn't think he'd be check raising them. Although now I suspect maybe he did, since he did call. Or I thought he did slow down and have a hand like Jack Queen, Jack King. I mean, Ace Jack. Those hands also make sense once he calls. And he shows Ace 9, and he snap called too, by the way, which is really good call, I guess. I'm not sure if it's the most plus EV play. He played 500 hands together. I don't remember doing anything out of line with him or pretty outrageous. I thought I made a credible play by representing a lot of hands that definitely crush Ace 9. But he made a good call in this spot and beat me. I'm trying to think back to how he played the hand. Ace 9, I think, is an okay call from the... Let me restart the hand. Okay, so he has... Okay, so he has Ace 9. I raise the button. He calls. Okay, so I mean, that's fairly standard, I think. Ace 9 is pretty close for me. I'd definitely be folding. Ace 7, Ace 8 can be close. Ace 10 also a call for me. And when he checks and I bet, I don't hate his check raise here with Ace 9. It gets against a lot of players, non-thinking players mainly, that just c-bet this board 100% of the time. A lot of the regs at 100 NL are kind of like this, where they're just sort of on autopilot playing 10 tables, and they c-bet, get check raise, and bam. Most of the hand range can't continue, so I don't mind Alligator's check raise here, to be honest. And I call. So once I call, Alligator, for the most part, should be giving up. Most players in the spot at 100 NL will not be floating here in this spot, so I definitely like his check on the turn once he does it. And once I check behind, I pretty much, in his shoes, would put the button on the hands that I sort of signed medium pairs, some jacks. And the 5, I like his check again. Pretty sure he just gave up. And once I bet, I mean, I don't think... I was trying to think about how often he was ahead here. And... it was definitely a hero call. I mean, one, I'm sure he doesn't make all the time. He's not always just calling with ace high because he's a winner in the games. He obviously has some sort of read on me, so... I personally wouldn't have called in his spot, but I'm not sure what read exactly he had on me. I definitely don't float check raises a ton and check the turn back. So I mean, I doubt he's seen me do that play with air before. I was debating on whether or not I would turn hands that beat him into bluffs. So I don't think I'd be folding ace king, ace queen, or ace 10 on the flop. And I don't think for the most part, I think I would check that down too, because I think he has a hand like this, or total air like 7-8 most of the time, and I expect my hand to be best. So I don't think I could bet there. It definitely wouldn't be for value. I don't think I turn it into bluff. So I mean, ace 9 is essentially ace king here, I think. The lowest pair I said I'd bet is probably pocket 7, so I guess I wouldn't be betting pocket 6s either. But from his spot, I think it's slightly neg-EV call against my hand range, but it worked out, fortunately, for him in this spot. The last hand I'd like to talk about is really interesting, I think. The player I play against is a big winner in the 100 Illinois games, Polarny, directly to my left. We played, I think, over 2,000 hands together, so I'm fairly sure we have decent reads on each other. Mine is that he is a pretty tight, aggressive player. Very good. Doesn't give up very often on pots he's in. Generally, makes correct plays for the most part. Ace Jack suited is just, automatic open for me. My range from this position is any pair, Ace 10 suited plus, Ace Jack offsuit plus, and rarely will I open some suited connectors, but just depends on table composition. So yeah, my range is pretty tight here for first position. I'm sure Polarny knows it. He calls. His calling range is any pair, I'd say, up to probably 10-10. He'd start 3-betting jacks. Probably start 3-betting kings, queens, and aces a majority of the time. Occasionally he may just call for deception purposes, try to induce a player behind to 3-bet. So, I mean, that he may be doing that. Usually I think he 3-bets. Ace-king suited, ace-king offsuit, I think also play the same. I think it typically 3-bets. Occasionally we'll be calling. Ace-queen, I'm fairly certain he'd be folding ace-jack from this position. Ace-queen, I think he usually would be calling. King-queen and king-jack, I think he would fold king-queen usually, just like the others. I'm sure he played king-queen suited and king-jack suited in this spot. And maybe he'd be calling with likely position on me the rest of the hand, the pre-flop raiser, and he might be calling with some suited connectors type hands, suited one gaps. So it folds around to me, and we see a flop of queen 10-4 rainbow. My hand has a gut shot, an overcard, and a backdoor flush draw. So, I mean, it wasn't like a great flop for me, but not the worst either. I'm definitely never checking this with this hand, so I'm pretty much just betting, hoping he folds out his pocket 7, pocket 8 type hands, although I'm sure he expects me to be c-betting this board almost always, and he would probably continue with some of his medium pairs. I don't think he's raising many hands on this flop. Pocket 4s, pocket 10s. If he has pocket queens, he might slow play him. It's not that dry, only king jack, jack 9. In the hand I have ace jack. I have draws, so I mean it's not terrible to call behind with this set here. The turn makes the board really dry, actually. 8-9 now has an open-ended straight draw. 5-6 has an open-ended straight draw. 6-8 has a double gutter. King-Jack and Jack-9 already had open-ended straight draws. It brings a club draw, which I could definitely have. I can pretty much have a pretty wide range in the spot. I think 100% of my pre-flop raising range I have in the spot, so I can have a flush draw that I picked up as well. And on this board, I intend to double barrel just to get him to fold. I don't think he's ever folding a queen, likely not a 10. I pretty much just want to get him to fold, a hand like 8-8 or 6-6, 5-5, any of those that he's feeling on the flop, and hoping I just gave up on the turn to check down. All of which beat me. I still have equity against them, so I think it's a decent spot to continue betting. So I bet $15 and $23, and he calls. So when he calls here, I discount all two pairs and all sets at this point. On board this draw with so many draws, tons of open-ended straight draws, lots of gut shots, flush draw. I don't think he's gonna let me draw for free on the turn. I've showed strength on 2 streets, so there's still value in raising a set. Worse hands are gonna call in the spot. So if he had a set or queen 10, I definitely think he would open up on the turn and raise me. So when he calls, I think he has one pair hand, like king queen, ace queen, maybe queen jack if he. I don't think he's calling queen jack, to be honest. Pre-flop. 10 jack suited, I guess he's still calling with. I really do suspect that he may be calling with some of the smaller pairs, but I think he would elect just to give up on this board. And the 5 of heart comes. I'm content here, I think, just to give up my hand and let him check down and win for the most part. And I check, and he bets, sort of surprisingly to me. I didn't think he would be betting a lot of hands here. Any 10 he had, I think he's checking back. The only hands he could be value betting are ace queen, king queen. And some hands did miss. So flush draws that he had on the turn missed. King jack missed. Jack 9 suited missed. So I mean, there are a few hands here, and I mean, immediately I was thinking, okay, he bet pretty easy fold, and I kind of got around to thinking about what hands he could value bet here. And I wasn't necessarily certain that it was incorrect to call. So I started thinking about it a little bit, and I did go ahead and call. But let me go ahead and bring up Poker Stove. It's a free software that you can use to plug in your hand against various hand ranges on different boards to see what your equity is. So, okay, so I have it open, and I put in my own hand, ace jack of spades, and the board so far. So let's put in hand range for this player. Okay, so before the flop, I said he was capable of. Let me see the board again real quick. Queen 10, 4, 7, 5. Okay, so I said occasionally he was capable of flat calling with hands like aces or kings. Although at this point, I'm not going to include him in his range. I strongly suspect he would have raised those on the turn if he didn't pop them on the flop. So I mean, he could have that hand, but I mean, it's just very unlikely. Same with pocket queens. To be honest, he definitely is raising this hand for value on the turn with so many draws on the board. I know he's a good player. Again, I don't think he's doing that. Ace, king, suited, and offsuit. Before the flop, I said that he was likely to 3-bet those hands. And those hands are hands that may call on the flop and turn. It has 2 overs and a gut shot straight draw to the nuts. So I mean, I could reasonably see him calling if he did call before the flop with ace king. Whether or not he would turn that into bluff, I don't know, and I don't think so. I mean, he may. So okay, so let's look at ace king suited. We obviously already have the ace of spades, so he cannot have that. And let's say out of the 3 remaining combinations, I think he would typically 3-bet this hand at least 2/3 of the time. He's an aggressive player, so I know that. So I'll leave one combination that he could have by the river. And whether or not he turned that into a bluff, I don't know. So I'll just leave one combination of ace king. Ace king offsuit, again, he can never have the spade. Again, I said he could get to the river that way. Again, I think he's 3-betting this hand normally, so I'll eliminate half the remaining combinations. And whether or not he bluffs the river, I think he may bluff it 1/3 of the time. It has hardly any showdown value, but it does have some. And whether or not I'd fold a pair on that board, I don't think he would think I would. I wouldn't be double barreling there with small pair, so either I'm checking the queen for pot control or 10 So I think he would have one combination of Ace King offsuit. King Ace Queen, I think, is his most likely holding that he's value betting, and I think he would probably have gotten to the river that way with all the holdings. He had, you know, a decent holding, but I'm not sure he could have raised it before the river. Sometimes he would, but I'm certain he would pot control a strong one pair hand like that. Same with Ace Queen offsuit. Doesn't have any of the spades, and I'm sure he's value betting all the combinations of that. King Queen suited, King Queen suited, I think he plays similarly. He can't have the spades, and this is a hand I'm not sure if he's value betting all his combinations. So I'm gonna leave 2 out of the remaining 3. King Queen offsuit. Fairly certain he would be folding that before the flop. I know he's tight out first position. King Queen doesn't play well against that, so I don't think King Queen is really in his range. It maybe, but I'm just for the sake of making things easy, I'm going to leave that out. King Jack suited, I think can't have. No, he can't. No, he can't have the Jack of Spades. I think if on this board he would play it like that for the most part. Same with Jack 9 suited. I don't think he's calling with all of his Jack 9s, so I'm going to leave 2 out of 3 remaining combinations there. Other hands, I can't think of many other hands that bet this river for value or would have gotten there this way, so I think he occasionally floats a flop and has a flush draw, so I will just include like 2 combinations of a random flush draw. So I'll just put in Ace 9 clubs there, or diamonds, and Ace 8. I don't think he ever has those specific combinations, but to make things easy, I will leave those in. Okay. Against his hand range, I have 35% equity. This includes all the hands I mentioned. So he's value betting all his ace queens, suited and offsuit, most of his king queens, and he's bluffing with king jack suited, jack 9 suited, and occasionally a couple diamonds. This seems a little high. I really don't think he's bluffing at that frequency, so I'm going to just tweak this a little bit and remove the flush draws and include maybe a couple combinations of king queen. You never know. Yeah. Against that range, I have 22% equity. So, I mean, I think, I suspect he's bluffing enough about 25% of the time here. And what does that mean? Okay, this is a formula you guys can use after you've decided your estimated equity. Okay, the pot at this point is $37 plus $52.50. So that's the amount of money we can win 25% of the time, let's say. And the times we lose $37, the amount we have to call to win that amount. So that is going to be about 75%. And doing the math here will quickly allow us to figure out that we will be losing $5.37 on average when making this call. This is essentially what a basic formula that you're going to be using when with close decisions on whether or not it is profitable or not profitable to call on the river. Our equity here, I mean, one time, depending on a hand range, I'm still not sure. I asked a friend, he said it was an automatic muck, whatever. The hand range, I think we're good here against his range about 25% of the time. Depending on his bluffing frequency, I mean, it could be a lot less, it could be a lot higher. And based on this estimation, it's a slightly losing play, so we'll be losing $5.37 on our call on average. So that is something, an important, formula that you guys just want to keep in mind to offline on your close decisions. I thought it was pretty close at the time. I ridiculously forgot about ace queen in his range, so I was thinking really fast. I was time banking. I thought he could, for the most part, only be value betting king queen, but yeah, it was close in my mind. And now that I've done the math, I think it's a fold. And he showed ace king, so yeah, I didn't really think he would be turning ace king into bluff. I mean, you can reasonably see it. If I had jacks, I could probably play it this way. 10 jack suited the same. They're essentially very close in hand value there. And I was debating if I did have 2 jacks here, if I would call this river bet. And considering all the missed draws, I called it ace jack, so obviously I'd be calling with jack. So yeah, it was an interesting hand, interesting decision. I made the wrong play. And these are 3 hands that were, all pretty tough for me. And it's not like standard that these hands occur all the time. Usually they're just no-brainer plays where they're not very close, either betting or calling, or, super easy folds. All 3 of these hands I thought were fairly difficult, and by using logic, we could narrow down their hand ranges in all 3 hands and come to a decision, a more accurate decision than just thinking, in this case, oh, I have ace high, I just get bet $37, fold. I mean, sometimes, depending on the player, if he was more bluffy, I'm not sure, I don't remember how bluffy he was, but a player that is going to bet a lot of his missed draws here ace jack will be a close call. And a player that typically doesn't have many draws that got there this way and is usually just going to be a queen that's betting, then it's a fold. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will probably do like a follow-up video, if not next time, a couple videos later with other interesting hands. These are just tools you can use for yourself in order to start thinking logically about what hand ranges they can have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is SoCalQuest signing off. Have a good one.